Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 306 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, starting with the owner of MTG Goldfish, Richard. How are you today, Richard?
Hey, Seth, I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty well as well. We got some fun topics to talk about. We had some interesting tournaments over the weekend, but before we get to that, we have another co-host in Krim. How are you today, Krim?
Morning, Seth. I'm doing quite all right.
That is good to hear. So podcast-wise today, we have, I think, three main topics. We're going to talk Zendikar Rising Championship, which happened this weekend, featuring Standard and also Historic. So kind of covering the tournament. We also had a WotC stream discussing upcoming Secret Lair stuff for 2021 this past week. So we want to talk a little bit about that. We got some more Kaldheim packaging that came out with, I guess, a little bit more information that we can draw from it. And then, of course, answering your fish mail. So that is the overview for today's cast. But before we get to all that stuff, we got a sponsor today. And Krim, I think you wanted to let us know a little bit about who that is and what they're about.
Yes, this sponsor is quite a spooky one. Well, actually, here's the thing. Even though Halloween and all that's already gone, the one thing that's great about it is that Shudder is spooky 24/7, 365. They've got tons of sweet exclusive titles coming this season. We've got Creepshow Animated Special, Scare Mew starring Josh Rubin, Aya Cash, and Chris Red, the Mario Bava Collection. All of those are going to be some exclusive titles coming this season. And it's all for $5.99 a month or $56.99 a year. They're pretty much the Netflix for horror movies. And if you're like me, I actually just watched Color from Out of Space this past month on Shudder, and that was really sweet. And they have a bunch of other horror movies and shows and stuff like that too. It can be streamed on any of your usual devices, an iPhone, iPad, and all that stuff too. And then, the greatest thing here is you can just go and get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content. Shudder's expertly curated collection includes titles like the acclaimed Tigers Are Not Afraid, One Cut of the Dead, Revenge, and the Creepshow TV series, all done by Greg Nicotero, and based on the famous films by George Romero. So go try Shudder for free for 30 days. Go to shudder.com and use the promo code GOLDFISH. And once again, that's Shudder, SHUDDER, shudder.com. So go drop our code GOLDFISH and you can get, your trial for 30 days free.
Awesome. That sounds super sweet. So with our sponsorship stuff out of the way, let's talk about Magic. And let's start with the Kaldheim Championship, which happened this weekend.
It's not Kaldheim. It's Zendikar Rising.
Zendikar. I'm mixing together Kaldheim packaging, Zendikar Rising. Okay, Zendikar
I think it's
Rising.
because we also have SCG's Kaldheim, right?
Yeah, there's too many different names going on for tournaments right now, I think. Zendikar Rising Championship happened this weekend, and it was a split format, Historic and Standard. And before we talk about what happened at the tournament, I gotta ask you guys, did you realize this was apparently a equivalent of a Pro Tour, like a Pro Tour replacement event? Because I honestly had no idea. When I hear Zendikar Rising Championship, I thought it was like one of those things that you qualified for through Arena and they let the MPL in because that's kind of what they do with tournaments. I had no idea it was like a Pro Tour replacement. Did either of you realize this was apparently like that big of a tournament?
I did, but only because of, people posting about it constantly and their preparation and stuff like that. So, it's all because I pretty much have all those people followed on social media, right? Like some of the MPL members and whatnot. So thanks to social media, yes.
Yeah, but what if you live under a rock like me? And Yetsuck's like, hey, there's some deck lists up. I'm like, huh? And I'm like, hey, it's a Pro Tour, but it's split format, but it's not limited, and it's arena only. Yep. And then the question is, how did you get here, right? Are you invited? Did you qualify somehow? I'm not sure, right? I think Wizards has dropped the ball in terms of advertising these things. Before it was very simple. Before it was new set release 2 weeks after there was a Pro Tour, right? And it's always counted on as limited followed by standard. Nowadays, we just get random tournaments thrown at us at weird cadences. We just had Worlds or the equivalent of Worlds happen. We just had the equivalent of a Pro Tour happen. But it's coming like off the heels of Commander Legends, right? Like the last thing I remember is Commander Legends. So the timing is weird. And then of course it headlined Historic, because Wizards wants to promote Historic. So yeah, it just felt like a new type of tournament to me, but you know, it is a Pro Tour. And Pro Tours are important to Magic.
I don't know why they did just call it, like, I don't know why they keep changing names. Like, we had Pro Tours and, like, Mythic Championships and Mythic Invitationals and then Players Tours, and now apparently set name / championship is a Pro Tour.
Not
like,
even Zendikar Rising Mythic Championship. Like, it's not Mythic
it's just
anymore.
What is it? Just Zendikar Rising Championship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if they just said Pro Tour Zendikar Rising, I would intuitively know that tournament mattered. But when I hear Zendikar Rising Championship, that sounds like a Magic Online event, like where you like play through the season, or an arena event where you like, I don't know, get top 1200 during the Zendikar, Rising season, and then you play in this big event, or like a SCG event where you compete during the week, and then this is like the championship on the weekend. So I just like had no idea this was a tournament that actually mattered until I was watching LSV stream last night, and he kept referring to it as a Pro Tour. I was like, oh wait, this was actually like, this was a tournament that actually mattered? I had no idea, honestly. And I was even watching it, and I didn't have any idea. Like, obviously there are a lot of good players, but I didn't actually connect that it was a Pro Tour level event. So maybe, I don't know, stop changing the names, or at least market what the tournaments mean a little bit better, perhaps. Might be a good idea. But anyway, we had magic happen at this tournament. Richard, why don't you walk us through the metagame a little bit, and then we can talk about the decks that did well at the tournament.
Ooh, yeah.
All right, split format. So historic and standard, with the top 8 bracket, or I guess the final day being historic. And metagame wise, standard coming in, Ghoul Adventures at 24%, Mono Green Food at 17%, Dimir Rogues at 17%, Temur Adventures 11%, Dimir Control 10%, Esper Doom Foretold 9%, and then Mardu Doom Foretold at 2%, and then other rounds it out at 9%. And then for historic, the most popular deck was the Sacrifice, both Rakdos and Jund clocking in at 30% combined. And then mid-range Sultai and 4-color, so basically like Piles at 28.3%, Goblins at 12.5%, Azorius Auras 6.5%, Azorius Control 5%. And the finals was a card we all loved near and dear, Doing Things, which Krim, I'm sure, would love to to replicate, but it was Teferi Azorius Control versus Goblins, and in the end, we saw the classic flip my Azcanta, untap it with Teferi, bury you in card advantage. Let me drop my 5-mana bomb and then protect it on the same turn with a counter spell. So actually, Goblins wasn't actually that. It's a pretty well-known deck, but it wasn't that represented at the tournament. But watching Muxus flips throughout the entire day, and like Autumn Burchett just piling that deck, but in the end, Teferi said no, and Big Teferi, because Small Teferi is not playable anywhere. Big Teferi just shut it down, and then Azorius Control is going to flood the ladder now.
Yeah, darn right it is.
I actually am. Do you think it's actually good, Krim, like for a random person to pick up and play on the ladder? Like,
definitely not. That's why.
Yeah.
Like, people will try to play it, and they're gonna try to replicate it, and there are a lot of serious amount of decision trees that you're gonna have to make, especially in historic, because remember, this sideboard is specifically for this tournament, which people are going to try to take straight to the ladder. But I think that that's going to be a little interesting because, it's built for, specifically this tournament, not the ladder. The ladder has a bunch of things on there. So that also then taxes your sideboard slot, which makes it interesting with, when it comes to a control deck, you do want to actually mitigate the number of bad cards, dead cards, whatever. And, it gets a little weird when you try to pretty much take an exact 75 to the ladder that was meant for a Pro Tour.
Yeah, and I think it's probably a challenging deck to play compared to like either Goblins or even Uropile, where Goblins or Uropile, you just have these oops I win draws, like you just Muxus and accidentally win, or Uro's another card that like it's kind of training wheels for your control deck. Like, even if you play sloppily, if you're like getting Uro value and drawing extra cards and gaining life, you can still just win a lot of games because Uro is a standalone, like, just busted card. But the blue-white control deck, I mean, I guess you have Teferi, which can win a game on its own if it resolves, but otherwise,
I'm going to be honest with you. It's
piecing it together.
It's good. Teferi's very good, but once again, I don't think that's like an auto win, like how Uro is, right? Like you answer it, that's that, right? Because it's not like they have like tons of ways to like shuffle it back in. There's no like Ether Vial or not Ether Vial, Elixir of Immortality. So cards like Uro and like Goblins, those are the decks that are just going to be very punishing when you stumble. They also spiral out of control real quick. So, you know, when you're playing this blue-white deck, you've really got to make sure your counterspells are kind of like your win conditions. And you've of course got Shark Typhoon and stuff like that too. So yeah, like it's a very difficult deck to pilot.
Teferi needs ETB, reveal the top 6 cards of your library, put all planeswalkers into play. Then you would be in business.
Yes. Give it one more year, and then the next Teferi will also do that. Yeah, like
I'm sorry, sorry, Richard. Go ahead.
No. We don't. I think Teferi untapping 2 lands. Unless you kill Teferi immediately, you probably lost already. It's like when they escape Uro for the 4th time, but you probably lost, right? But you may be able to claw it out. But, Brad Barclay, our champion, didn't drop a single match in Historic running Azorius Control. And remember, Azorius Control was just 5% of the field. The other pilots did not fare so well. So this just might be the instance of like the perfect deck for the metagame, piloted by someone who knows the deck in and out, and then also getting the good draws. But
I love Brad Barclay's lineup for both tournaments. So
Dimir control followed by Azorius control.
Yeah. I have to say, like, Brad Barclay is a very, 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 very awesome player for bringing both of those decks to the tournament.
Also, I think the first Scottish Pro Tour champion.
I believe so.
Yeah, but are we still calling these Pro Tours? Like, I don't.
Who knows? Who knows anymore?
I think the first set championship person from Scotland.
I also like that, by the way, in Brad Barclay's list, he's got the 2 main deck cages. I've been a fan of the main deck cage, and I'm glad that, you know, people are just starting to play that in the main, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. Gravedigger's Cage is like the glue that or at least it's the responsible card in Historic that makes it so fair magic happens.
That's the sign of a healthy format. Main deck Gravedigger's Cage.
It's pretty much the main deck Leyline of the Void, right? For Modern.
So we focused a lot on Goblins and Blue-White Control, which they were the 2 decks in the finals. The rest of the top 8, 6 Uropiles, either 4-color or straight Sultai, which really they're essentially the same deck. One is splashing some number of Yasharns, but it is really like very, very, very similar. So rest of the top 8, all Uropiles. Also of note, and this is a little complicated by the split format, but Jund and Rakdos Sacrifice were the number 1 deck going in. They didn't get anyone into the top 8, whether or not that's because they performed badly in Standard or performed poorly in Historic. We don't really know. Timed out, trying to cat Levin loop. That's also possible. But I think it's definitely notable. So, before we move on to talk about Standard, do you think there needs to be changes to Historic based off of this metagame? Like, just looking at the metagame, how are we feeling about Uro? Like, is that a card we still want running around after watching the tournament? I know Goblins was only 12%, but boy, is Muxus, like, it's very much a Hearthstone card. Like it's somewhere between do nothing and win the game when it enters the battlefield, which just maybe that's good for coverage, but boy is it obnoxious to play against, I think.
I think the fact that now there are some Goblin decks that are just trying to go for the turn 3 Muxus, they've always been able to kind of like turn 3, which is kind of disgusting. But they've gotten they've gotten more consistent turn 3s when they've got the Irencrag Feet. So like, I do think that Muxus and like Goblins as a whole is operating on a whole nother power level. Cause imagine if you don't have a Censor, an Ether Gust or something like that. Let's say you're just playing like fair Magic and you don't have counter spells. How are you supposed to beat that?
Yeah. And I think it's one of those decks that's probably overrepresented on the ladder because you get to play really quickly. And if you want to just like rank up, it seems like kind of the perfect deck compared to trying to like cat oven loop for 45 minutes or blue-white control or Uro control. Like Goblins, I think sees way more play on the ladder than it does in tournaments like this just because it's such an ideal deck to rank up with on the ladder. Right. So you play against it a lot on Arena, I think. At least I do.
And I think that I definitely also play against Goblins a lot. And that's why I'm up to about 3 cages at least in the main of most decks that I play. And with the Sultai, like, the Uro piles, I'll say it again, I think that Uro and Nissa should just be deleted. Just delete those 2 cards. I will always advocate for Nissa to get deleted because every time anybody untaps with that card, you lose the game.
Yeah, so, that is true.
I'm going to say that Historic needs Goblins because outside of Goblins, it just looks and feels like Standard. It's the same stuff we've been seeing, like Sacrifice, Uro piles, stuff like that. And Goblins is like the one deck where like we haven't seen in Standard, and that's what's keeping Historic looking like not Standard, basically. It doesn't really help that like these are some of the saltiest standards ever, right? Like I don't want to see any more Teferis, right? I don't want to see any more Uros, right? So at least I'm like, okay, Muxus, sure, it looks a little broken and whatever, but it looks different, right? I don't want to see you ramping into an Ugin. Like I've seen enough of this, right? So
yeah, we have Tron.
I mean, you can argue that Historic is kind of just like the graveyard of banned Standard decks. You have like number 1 Cat Oven, number 2 Uro. But moving down the list, it's just like where the cards from Standard, once they get banned, they go to continue to annoy people.
That's like most like of Magic from the last. Like I feel like most of the formats kind of look like that in some way, though, right? Because these cards are so format warping, and like they're so powerful. Like Uro, that's everywhere, you know what I mean? Like, you see some Teferis, but like, I do believe that a good amount of the last couple of years is kind of just sprinkled throughout all of the formats, and, specifically Uro. Like, I don't even advocate for a Muxus ban. I do think that Goblins is a powerful deck, but like Richard said, we need some kind of aggro combo-ish deck, right? But Uro and Nissa, I think those 2 should go. Everything else can stay. I just don't like those 2 cards.
Yeah, I just hate the design of Muxus, I think. I hate the random element, I think is what drives me a little bit crazy, but I do agree that on power level alone, it probably doesn't need to get banned. So maybe the most surprising thing for me this weekend is if you look at the 2 metagames, Standard is significantly more diverse than Historic is, which came as kind of a surprise to me. Like the top decks are less played. There's actually 6 decks that are roughly 10% or more of the meta, which is kind of astoundingly healthy for Standard of the past couple years. Like the best Standard has been since, I don't know, War of the Spark, maybe pre-War of the Spark, even. Like, we're going back 18 months now or something, that Standard has been at this good of a place for a tournament. What do you guys think about Standard? Like, are you enjoying it? I think, obviously, the format is diverse. Is it something that's fun for you guys right now?
Though it is, diverse, right? Like, just want to state that diversity of the format could still lead to, like, some weird gameplay issues, but I actually don't feel that way about this one, right? This is pretty good. I think it's just funny that it took 9 bans, but and like most of Eldraine to Eldraine still is dominating this format. So I will say that, and that shows you how absolutely busted Eldraine is, but I think it is a fun format. When like Rogues is a deck you can beat if you like anyone really wanted to prepare for it, and Gruul Adventures is very like represented but beatable, and Mono Green Food is like I think my ideal matchup if I'm playing Dimir Control, right? So I really like this format. There's an archetype for everybody.
So
Except combo, I guess.
I'll drop you the facts from a casual now. I haven't played Standard because it's all dominated by Eldraine, and I've played enough Eldraine by now, right? And then Rogues is a new is something from the new set, right? But the rest of the cards are like Eldraine and then Ikoria. And we've played enough, like I've seen enough Embercleaves, I've played enough Embercleaves, right? Like, yes, mono green food was like cool for a while, but that's just playing like Oko without the Oko, right? So like I don't know. I feel while it is diverse, it isn't especially interesting because like this is like the third or fourth set or whatever that we've played the same basically adventures deck, right? The Eldraine cards. So I'm all done making food and drawing off my adventures and storybook cards or whatever. So I'm just waiting for the next set, right? Like even though Zendikar Rising just released like a month ago. So I don't know. I feel while it is diverse, like it's just the same overpowered cards from a couple sets ago that are still in the format.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of like in between the two of you. It does feel very samey to me. Like it is a lot of the stuff we've been seeing at various times, discounting like the obviously broken stuff they got banned, but it is a lot of the same archetypes, food, adventures, etc., Doom Foretold that we've seen over and over again. So that is, I guess, a drawback to some extent that we're not seeing a ton of brand new stuff. We're not seeing a ton of like Zendikar Rising decks, I would say, outside of Rogues would be the exception to that for the most part. So it does feel kind of the same. At the same time, it's really hard to complain about diversity, especially in a format like Standard. Like I'll take the same decks we've seen in a diverse format where you have 10 different playable decks or more compared to 50% Wilderness Reclamation or 50% Obnath or 70% Oko or whatever.
Definitely.
It is kind of mind-blowing that the 6 best cards, presumably, from Throne of Eldraine are banned, and you can argue that all of the best cards, or at least all of the best decks in Standard, are still built around Throne of Eldraine card. Like, that's how insane that set was, is you chop out the 6 best cards, and it's still, by far, the best thing going in Standard, with Embercleaves and Doom Foretolds, the food decks with Troll Kings, like, it's kind of shocking.
Giant.
Bone Crushers and Brazen Borrowers, and yeah, it's really mind-blowing that you could get rid of that many cards. There aren't many sets like that. Could you imagine if you took, like, the 6 best cards out of Theros Beyond Death, let's say? Like, you get rid of...
Are there even?
There's nothing. Like, yeah, like...
6 to hit?
Yeah, like, the set just doesn't exist if you do that. But with Throne of Eldraine, it was so busted that you could do that, and it's still the best set in Standard by a pretty wide margin, I think.
That is very true and very disgusting. So, like at the same, like, you know what I mean? Because it's like, wow, why is Eldraine so powerful? Oh my gosh! When like I remember like we had talked about it right a while back when this was coming out, and I remember we were doing our top 10 video. Yeah, like we talked about like how a lot of this set just seems absolutely bonkers, right? But it's funny because I was really high on cards like Brazen Borrower, and Brazen Borrower was like, when you look at a card like Brazen Borrower, everybody should be like, now that is a mythic. That is absolutely wild. But it kind of just, when in spoiler season, it got passed as it's decent. It could see play.
I remember...
I still don't feel like it's a mythic. Like, it's obviously very strong, but it's like a utility card. It's like a utility card. It's not like
so good. Like a card like that is so good. It bounces a non-land permanent and gives you a 3/1 flash flyer. Right? You look at that, and I would say that's pretty good. I mean,
is Fatal Push a mythic? That's also really good.
I don't want my Into the Royals to be mythics. I want to be able to spend like a rare wild card or an uncommon wild card for like the glue cards that hold my deck together. It's obviously really strong. I would put it maybe in the top 10 cards in the set, even counting the banned cards. It's like, I think right on the edge of the top 10, which shows how deep the Throne of Eldraine is.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's obviously an insane card, but I still wish it was rare.
I mean, yeah, rare, mythic, uncommon, whatever, right? Like the thing here is, for me, like when you look at that set and Brazen Borrower coming, like is, pretty low on the top 10 of the list is pretty bonkers to me.
Yeah, someone on Twitter, because this came up on Twitter, and someone asked, like, so what would you say the top 10 cards, counting the banned cards, would be from the set? Like, what are your top 10? And I tried to make a top 10 list, and the problem I kept running into is I couldn't get, like, Mystical Sanctuary, a card that's, like, breaking Modern, essentially, like, on the list because there's so many cards. Like, I had Oko, Once Upon a Time, Fires, Embercleave, Cat, Great Henge, Bone Crusher, Lucky Clover, Questing Beast, Brazen Borrower. That's 10, and that doesn't include Robber the Rich, Castles, Fabled Passage, Stonecoil Serpent, Gilded Goose, Mystical Dispute, Doom Foretold, Torbrand, Claim the Firstborn, Trail of Grubs, Drought of the Lock, Murderous Rider, Mystical Sanctuary. That's a who's who of the cards that are breaking various formats at the moment. Like, it blows my mind how good that set is. Like, and the other thing about that is, if you remember back to when it happened and we were in all the uproar over Oko, Wizards published an article that said, like, outside of the outliers, like Oko, Once Upon a Time, like, this is kind of what we're shooting for power level wise. So interesting for sure.
I remember having discussions about with the kind of one set, on a plane, release that, like, basically parasitic mechanics like adventures or food, like they don't have a chance, right? You're not going to have enough support cards. And then as new sets release, you're not going to get any more synergies. But turns out Wizards just made them so strong that even without any new synergies, like the same core and the same cards have just lasted throughout, like, basically all of Standard. And even like Goose plus Oko is enough for, like, older formats, right? Like that food synergy is just enough, right? So I think Wizards was trying to solve this issue of, like, when we visit a plane for one set and one set only, how do we make mechanics that work together but are powerful enough? And then they just overshot, right? It's just so powerful that it just dominates everything, and it doesn't need any additional cards.
And I think that's something maybe that they are learning from and changing, because it does seem like, even just based on what we've seen from Zendikar Rising, that part of their goal this year is to kind of have sets synergize together more instead of having these, like, standalone parasitic sets. Because we know we got, like, Party, and we know we're getting a D&D set. We got part of the Flip Lands. We know we're getting the rest of them in Kaldheim. So in some ways, it kind of feels like they're borrowing from the old system where mechanics and sets and themes are carrying over from set to set, which wasn't something that was really happening in the beginning of the standalone block era. So I think they're, like, learning from that and heading in the right direction with it, but who knows how long it'll take to actually come to fruition, because it's a slow process when they change things as far as designing sets, because they work so far ahead. Anyway, any other thoughts on Standard or Historic or the Zendikar Rising Championship before we hit up some other news?
I mean, no, I guess for me the final touches are, like, Standard. If a deck like Dimir Control and stuff like that can be good, I think that's a format I like. And I mean,
I'm sure you do, Krim. I'm sure you do.
Yeah. Cause, like, I mean, and it's not even the best deck, right? I just think that a deck like that where I can play that, okay, that's cool. Because that means Fair Magic is, like, playable, somewhat fair. And I mean, I wasn't blocking anyway, so Embercleave, no Embercleave, whatever.
So the other big piece of news this week is Wizards had their weekly stream last week and talked a lot about Secret Lair drops, a little bit about the past, a lot about the future and what to expect coming up. So Richard, what did Wizards let us know that's coming up Secret Lair wise?
All right. We have, they actually revealed Secret Lair for the Pathways, the new MDFC lands that come into play untapped. Is coming, similar to, I guess it's the replacement for the fetch land drop we had earlier. More artist series coming next year. So we had the Seb McKinnon artist series this year already. I guess Bob Ross, but they're bringing back old artists that have drawn cards from Magic's history, and they're bringing them back under the Artist Series. They announced the Foglios, who I guess the most famous card is Kumbaj Witches, maybe. But if you look at some of their cards, it's the art that we've been talking about when we talk about old school Magic art and how unique it was, and how kind of nowadays it's all homogenous. Well, they're bringing that back for Secret Lair. And then they also showed us a Nature's Lore, aka movie poster that looks blue card. You should see it on your screen right now if you're watching it on YouTube, but it literally looks like a postcard or something you would buy at a national park. And it's blue for some reason instead of green. I don't know if I can disagree more with this card. It is sweet, but it just does not look green to me. And then
I think that's why I like it.
Yeah. And then the news that no one really wanted to hear. Walking Dead Secret Lair was the greatest selling Secret Lair of all time. It exceeded all expectations, and it got in a lot of non-Magic players to buy the product. So a resounding success from Wizards' point of view.
Not surprised though. Remember, I told you all, like when I just logged in to check it out. The website was lagging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that always happens.
I mean, yes. Sorry, let me rephrase. The outside of the usual lagging that comes from any kind of WotC run thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, start speculating for whatever popular franchise that you will think will come for in 2021.
I still wonder if the same goal could have mostly been met if they were silver bordered. Like, if you're not a Magic player, do you even know the difference between silver border and black border? Do you care if your card is legal in Legacy? I would guess the answer is no. So if that's like a big part of the audience, I still feel like they could have probably sold a ton of copies to Walking Dead fans and some to Magic fans too, and not had the community freak out at them if they just made them silver border.
I think the Magic community bought these cards up. I believe everyone like shouts and yells, and then FOMO overtakes, and they bought them anyway secretly and don't tell anyone. So even though it's so like a lot of them sold to non-Magic players, I think a lot of Magic players bought them because they feared, the price would increase or something, or one day they needed somewhere. But I mean, a lot of casual players play Commander, right? Like I don't think casuals are like to the extent where they just play like random piles from their shoebox or something, right? I think casual players in this aspect is like they don't watch content, but they do have like 100 card Commander deck, right? And they do want to play their Walking Dead cards in their deck. So I think making it silver bordered, like no one would buy it. Like it's like you just can't play it, right? It's just something you hang on your wall versus something you can put in your deck.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true. But, geez. Well, I guess we'll see. That does mean we're going to be getting more of that, I'm sure, because Wizards does like making money, which I guess is kind of their job. But so we'll see what crossovers come next. I like the Nature's Lore. I do wish the color scheme was greener, because it does very much look like a blue card, but the art looks really cool. And apart from the fact that you have no way of knowing it's a green card by just looking at it, I actually think it looks really sweet, and I would play it, but I do wonder why maybe they couldn't have just like had the background colors be a little bit greener and a little less blue, and that would have maybe improved it.
What I'm going to do is break out my trading cards from when I was like 10 years old. So like, what is it? It's like Garbage Pail Kids, or I can't remember what it's called. We had like all these like weird cards. I'm just gonna slot them into my Commander deck and see if anyone notices, because it's starting to get ridiculous, right? Like these cards. Like, can you just imagine like a deck of like like a 5C deck, and then you just put all these cards in? Like your deck is not recognizable as a Magic deck anymore. So it's like, is this a really cool proxy, or is this an official card? Nobody knows anymore, right? There's not even like the holo foil stamp, or do you think they're going to add it in? This is just a mock. Do you think there's a holo foil?
I was actually kind of surprised because there's no there's no like type line either. There's no like artist or copyright or any of that stuff. And I think even like the heavy metal cards actually have that at the bottom. And that's probably the closest thing we've seen to this Nature's Lore. So I don't know if this is a mock-up and they haven't added it yet or not, but I was definitely surprised not to see that, because even other similar cards with the same kind of like artwork have had that on there. So this is even next level compared to like the heavy metal cards they just released.
Yeah, I assume the frame will get put on afterwards. I assume this is a mock-up, because I assume we're not getting a square card.
Yeah, okay, I guess that's probably true. What do you think about the Secret Lair Ultimate Edition? So the Pathway lands. Do those have enough cachet that people are gonna, freak out for them and buy them like they did fetch lands? Or, I don't know, they just printed them. You can still buy booster boxes of Zendikar Rising. Like, are people gonna pay a premium for those like they did for the fetches?
I'm not sure if, like, I like some of the artworks. I like the blue-black land, obviously, but all the other ones, to me, just seem meh. And even with whatever ones come in Kaldheim as of right now, I don't know, like, cause we're gonna have to buy them all together, right? Like this is gonna be like how the fetches all came together, right?
I think all 10, yeah. They're gonna add the Kaldheim ones in and you'll buy like a box set of 10 essentially.
I don't know. I mean, if I only want just Clearwater Pathway, I might just pick up Clearwater Pathway, right? I mean, it's not like these are super low in stock and I have to, like, I don't know. I don't really feel like I need to buy the whole set.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too. And the other thing that I think makes me a little less excited is, while the art itself is different, we already have extended borders of these. Like, I opened some Zendikar Rising Collector's boosters. I honestly couldn't, if you put a picture of both of them on the screen, I don't think I could tell you, if I didn't look at the set symbol, which one was the Secret Lair and which one came out of the Collector's boosters. So they're not that different than the Extended Border Collector's Edition versions you can already get. So they feel less blingy to me, I guess, than some of the other Secret Lairs. Like, why would I spend presumably way more money to get these Extended Borders when I already have a cheaper Extended Border edition from Zendikar Rising Collector's boosters?
I actually don't like these cards. Like, I don't know. Like, every time I play a Pathway, it feels bad. It doesn't... to me, it's not like in my top tier of lands I'd put in my commander deck. And then the actual downsides of it, like you have to take it out of the sleeve and flip it, or you have to use a checklist card. Like, it's just super annoying. You got to make sure your sleeves are opaque from the back. Like, I don't know. I just rather not deal with it. So like, I actually don't like playing these in my commander deck, right? I feel like they go pretty far down the list. I would start with like, shock lands, fetch lands, triomes. I think I would receive
Scry lands. Like, I'd play Scry lands over those.
Battle bond lands first, right? And then I don't know.
Wait. Is this based just on like playing with it literally, or like, and or is it like you don't like? Because I think these are like design wise, these are really awesome.
This is like gameplay wise, right? I think they could have chosen better dual lands to appeal to commander players.
I think that's true. I think they're actively pretty bad in commander.
Yeah.
At least that's my opinion, because I feel like in commander, especially if you're playing non-CDH commander, 6, 7 power level commander, having some tap lands like Scry lands is not the end of the world, and having your dual lands only tap for a single color of mana is extremely punishing in a format where a lot of decks are 3 colors, 4 colors, 5 colors, and that just kind of cuts these lands out altogether, because in a 3+ color deck, your dual land only tapping for 1 color mana is way, way, way more painful, I think, over the long run than having to play a Triome that comes into play tapped or something. So I actually think they're pretty bad for commander, which does kind of make them a weird choice for this kind of product when they could do, I don't know, like the Battle Bond lands, if they wanted something more specifically focused on commander, or many other cycles, honestly, that could have filled this void compared to the Pathways. Although the Pathways, they are really good in standard. They are showing up more and more in formats like Pioneer and Historic, and even Modern. I see them on occasion, where if you're playing a 2-color aggro deck, they are like pretty good in those formats.
I still think they're good in 2-color decks in EDH. But
yeah.
Like, right, like, I mean,
because
it's rather that I'd rather have that than like, there's like no shortage of tap Dimir lands, let's say. So
what about the ones
removing
that gain you a life, Crim? The cheaty lands. You can't cut the cheaty lands
Yeah,
that gain you a life for this.
The cheaty lands stay. The cheaty lands stay. Dismal Backwater is a friend.
Crim doesn't play enough green, but actually the problem with even like a monocolor deck or a 2-color deck is you don't have enough basics to fetch with all your ramp. So like whatever lands you play, like they need to be really strong because you have so many utilities and then like your basic dual lands like command tower and things like that I often run out of like basics. And that I will actually cut dual lands for basics so that I can actually do, Farseek into Kodama's Reach into whatever 4 CMC 2 force ramp I want to grab. So yeah, I don't like pathways. And plus it's Ultimate Edition. You can't put, I don't know. I feel they could have gotten a lot, like even like the canopy lands or whatever, like Horizon Canopy, like stuff like that. I feel there are a lot of lands they could have used. Rather than the pathways.
I will say, before we move on, the Artist series lair drops, that's kind of exactly what I want Secret Lairs to be. Like, you get the nostalgia of having these old artists coming back, some of them very beloved artists that haven't made Magic art in a long time, presumably making cool new versions of reprints so you avoid the unique card issue. So I think that was a huge and very good choice by Wizards. Like, I'm super hyped for the Artist series to see what the Foglios and like, there's rumors Rebecca Gay's doing one because she mentioned she has a new product coming out this year and she's a very beloved Magic artist that hasn't made art in a long time. So I think the Artist series is a really, really good choice. And I'm definitely down for more of those in the Secret Lair series.
Telling you, she's going to make Amanatu, Sensei's Divining Top, and Counterbalance. That's and it's just going to be called the Crim Special. And look, I wouldn't even be mad. I wouldn't be mad, you know?
They're gonna throw it at Nissa in there. Just
just random, and also Nissa.
All right. So last piece of news this week before Fishmail, that this just kind of came out today on the MTG Finance subreddit first, and then it went to the main subreddit. We got some more Kaldheim packaging. We actually get a close-up look at a booster pack, and also the packaging of 2 commander decks that will be coming. It looks like a Golgari deck and a Azorius deck, will be coming along with Kaldheim. Any thoughts on this little drip of Kaldheim news? We've been getting like little drips and drags over the last couple of weeks. Spoiler season, I think, is still like a month away, but what do you make of this packaging?
I mean, so far, like, it kind of just reminds me of this Thor pin that I have, like for at least the booster packs. And it's like fused with like the death metal cards that we just saw.
It looks just like Secret Lair.
Yeah. And if you're telling me that, okay, I might be in the minority with this one, but like if you're telling me more Magic cards look like the metal stuff, oh yeah, that's sick.
I mean, those could be the showcase cards, right? Like,
yeah,
we get some like heavy metal showcase cards with this. I think that would be cool. I think it's also notable that the booster pack that we see, it's not a face. Like, normally you have a character on there. We're looking at what is probably an equipment, I would guess, like a hammer. Like that to me says that's an equipment, which if they're putting on the booster pack has got to be one of the big cards in the set, the chase cards of the set. So I don't know. Are we going to get some new busted equipment? It's been a while. Like, equipment's improved. We got Embercleave, obviously. We had some decent ones from Zendikar Rising. Like, Maul the Skyclave is pretty good. It shows up in Modern, but yeah.
It's going to be Hammer of Fire and Ice and Hammer of Light and Shadow. And that is how it's going to go down.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be cool.
Actually, would you like that? Like, let's say they just made it like just 2 mana to play, but it's +1/+1.
I mean, I don't think I actually want functional reprints of swords. I think that would be a little... Well, I hope it's something new and unique.
They wouldn't be swords, and it would be new. Yeah. Hammer of Light and Shadow. Hammer of Feast and Famine.
So I mean, I guess that's all we really got from Kaldheim. If you want to go to Reddit and like squint really hard, you can kinda almost make out the face cards of the commander decks, but they're not big enough to really, to really know exactly what they say or anything. But if you want to do some internet sleuthing and try to figure out what they say, you can find them on Reddit. Richard, fish mail?
All right. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we get to your question on air. Aspired Pro MTG, do you think we need another companion errata? It seems the more time in the standard, the more companions are seeing play. Are they too good now?
I'm pretty happy with where companions are at now, I think. Like, I feel like we're at a pretty good balance where the good ones especially are good enough that they do see play to some extent. Yarion, we see Abash a little bit, Luris, of course, but they're not showing up in every single deck like they were before the errata. So I think that's fine. Like, I think it is their current level. I'm glad that they're seeing a little bit of play. I guess it would have been a shame if they just totally errataed them in a way that they are unplayable. If you're going to do that, you might as well just ban them straight up rather than do something ridiculous like that. So I don't know. I think I'm pretty okay with where companions are at the moment, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issues with companion. It's so funny to me. Like, it just feels like it's been so long ago since companions were a problem for me.
And you kind of always liked him too.
Yeah,
I also
already liked him.
You were like, you kind of already liked him even before the errata to some extent.
Yeah. I liked what they were trying to do with it. Yes, some companions are obviously very broken, but yeah, I thought it. I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal right now.
Joe Bovita, with so many Magic products coming out, it's increasingly impossible to get all of them. Are we going back to Richard Garfield's original vision of limited product availability as part of the game?
I mean, the thing is, most of those products are reprint products, so I feel like casually, yes, you could go back to that way, but I feel like you still need to keep up on a lot of these products if you're going to play, like, competitively, quote unquote. If you're going to try to, like, play in tournaments or grind on Arena, you still kind of got to keep up with them. So I don't think we're back to the days of, where Richard Garfield initially thought, like, oh, Black Lotus isn't a problem because you might not even know anyone that has a Black Lotus because they're going to be so infrequent and you're going to buy so few cards. And even if you do, you have one player in your play group that has one copy, like whatever, that's not a big deal. I don't think we're going back to that. Like, we have the Magic Internet. You can buy whatever cards you need. We have tons of deck lists that are available. So I don't imagine we're going to go back to some casual free-for-all where people are not playing good cards because of availability issues.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it depends on who you ask. Like, I can't imagine if you're in high school and you're playing Magic, like, you're just dropping $500 or $1,000 to, like, play. If you play, like, Legacy or Vintage, you are restricted by what's available to you, right? Like, if you just have, like, blue-red dual lands, you're only playing blue-red decks, right? Like, that's all you got. So it is like that to some extent, but I don't think this would apply to, like, say, Standard or something, like, going forward. I think because it's a competitive game, like, all players expect to have access to all of the cards, which is why people always lament about the price of Magic. Like, if you don't have all the cards, you just cannot play Standard competitively. So yeah. Apollo Gods, how long do you think Magic Arena will last, lifetime-wise, in its current state if nothing changes? For example, with the economy, the way Standard has gone the last year or so, and questionable card design choices.
So okay, I'll start with this one. So I answered Wizards' survey this weekend. It showed up in my email, their Magic Arena survey. And one of the questions that shows up on all these surveys is, how do you think Magic Arena as a whole is doing right now? Is it increasing? Is it holding steady? Or is it decreasing? And I think I had always chosen increasing, improving, until this survey was the first time where I clicked holding steady, I think was my option this time around. So I actually made me wonder, like, does Wizards view this as another Magic Online, a client that people are going to be using for literally almost 20 years now for Magic Online? Or is Arena a disposable free-to-play game like Magic Duels where it lasts for 5 years. It gets popular. It gets less popular. Wizards eventually shuts down the servers, and we have whatever, Magic Arena 2 or Magic Duels returns or some other like digital client. What do you guys think? Like, what is Wizards' long-term plan? Is this even intended to be like a client that lasts for 20 years, or is it more of a short-term thing?
I would like to hope, with how much we've sunken in this year, that this is a client that, you know what I mean? Like, that is a client that we can, like, keep playing. Obviously, I'd love for it to, like, succeed. I mean, but to say how long it'll last, that really comes down to, like, how much they actually put into it, right? We've already got, like, other clients, like, Runeterra, who just, like, held their first, like, digital GP, right, in client. And so I would really like for Arena to stay around, but in order for that to happen, you've got to actually kind of brush up on it. Like, I mean, I don't know if they will, as you've seen, like, Moto is kind of ancient, but, ooh. So, like, if I'm looking at Moto and, like, that is what's going to be, Arena eventually down the line, I am concerned, but I have to have faith that they are going to update it and change it over time. So
yeah, there's
there's
no way they would abandon it unless like the whole world changes, which is what they did with Magic Online, right? Like with Magic Online, everything was 1-to-1 with real money, and the paradigm in our world today is you want to cut ties with money and replace them with gems so people don't understand like what they're spending, and then like free to play it, right? That's how all games are built. So they abandoned Magic Online and made Arena. I can't imagine them abandoning Arena. Like if anything, it'll be something like World of Warcraft or League of Legends, where like 5 years from now, they release a new client based on the existing infrastructure. So your account would carry over, but your new client would have fancy graphics and things like that. But I can't imagine in 5 years them saying, oh, migrate to Magic Arena 2, and that historic collection you've been building that cost you like $8,000, it's now down the tubes, right? Like, I highly doubt they would ever do such a thing unless like in 8 years, like the monetization of games changes, that we're no longer like loot boxy gems. Like it's become illegal or something, right? And they have to use like a new system. But I just can't imagine them like throwing it all away. Like if they would just make another client using your existing account, which is something they should have done with the original Magic Online. They should have ported your collection over, but they didn't, right?
So bold prediction. When we were looking back on this 10, 20 years in the future, Magic Online will clunk along with its dozens of players and outlive Magic Arena. I think Magic Online is just never going to go away. It'll probably, never be huge or popular, but it feels like it's pretty easy for Wizards to just maintain it at this point with, one intern or something keeping it patched together.
It's going to die. So eventually there won't be enough legacy and vintage and modern players, right? And then the cost of coding new cards for each set will be too much. So I think it will eventually die. I don't think they can clunk it along forever because they have to keep updating it. And you see like Commander Legends like broke all of Moto, right? Like they can't keep this thing alive cheaply, right? It costs them a lot of resources to keep going. So I think eventually there just won't be enough players to justify them coding new cards for new sets.
I would like for this to happen, and it is there aren't enough players to keep Moto running, and Arena is just infuriating everybody, and so together they fuse the two. Hear me out, all right? Whoa. And we just use one client and we have a good old time using one client, everything's streamlined. And hear me out, this is the best part. Maybe, just maybe, you've heard of Cyberpunk 2077, but have you heard of Spectator Mode 2077? Let me tell you that. Boom. Right there. Technology is ready.
It's another 5 years for spectator technology, Kim. We know this.
I'm being a bit ambitious. I'm sorry. But, I thought maybe, just maybe, in the year 2077, we could have spectator.
If they're pushed to esports and their investment into esports, and they're like, do you have a spectator mode? Can you replay games from a bug? What if the game crashes? Like, no, none of this, right? We're just esports. What does that mean? I don't know. We're esports.
Just respond with esports. Okay. It just makes me think of that meme where Like there's a huge leak and then they just slap a Band-Aid over the hole in the leak.
You know what it actually reminds me of?
Esports.
You know the Office episode where they're doing parkour? Yeah. They're just like running around. Like, I feel like they're just running around and they're like, Esports. Esports.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is exactly it too.
All right, last question. Bro, Hiramin 1. I really like the party mechanic, but I think it needs to be pushed a little more to be competitively viable. What mechanic / card over the years did you enjoy but wish had been a bit more pushed so it could have seen more play?
Ooh.
Food.
Energy. I'm trying to think of like what was not really popular, but
I'm gonna say Soul Shift. Soul
Going
Shift.
that far back?
It's an interesting mechanic, getting your spirits back from the graveyard. Unfortunately, at the time, Wizards thought that to have that be a mechanic, they had to make each of your creatures cost like 3 more mana. So you had a lot of like 6 mana 3/2s and stuff that had the mechanic on it. So I think it's an interesting mechanic, but the cards were just so bad and overcosted that you couldn't really do anything with it. So fix Soul Shift. Let's go old school, all the way back to Kamigawa.
I'm going to say reinforce. The good old Kithen mechanic.
Oh, where I was like, what is that?
You could use a card in your hand and pay its reinforce cost and put +1/+1 counters on something. So basically, you turn your creatures into like sorcery speed combat tricks. It's just not costed in any way such that you would give up that card advantage. But similar to how they fixed auras with like the bestow creatures and things like that, I think they could have fixed reinforce somehow to make it competitively viable. So to turn basically all your creatures into combat tricks. Maybe that's just like the adventure cards. Maybe that's what that actually is, but yeah, reinforce.
My pick is going to be one that was played, but not like it wasn't like a deck entirely on the mechanic, which would be Morph.
Megamorph?
Yeah, they already fixed it. They fixed it with Megamorph.
No. I want just because they slapped Mega in front of it, that doesn't change anything. I want Morph decks. So not just a few Morph cards sprinkled throughout the deck. I mean, all in on the tribal part of it, where it is just nothing but face down cards. So when people walk by and look at what game you're playing, they have no clue what's going on through the sleeves. and maybe it's because I just constantly want to yell, "You've activated my trap card," and then flip up a card. But I liked Morph, and I would love to see Morph tribal. Not just like, yeah, I know Den Protector was played, but I want more than a Den Protector.
How about Manifest? Manifest is also more fixed.
No, I didn't like Manifest is like medium. You know, like, man, there is a difference. I like Morph a little bit more.
All right. Coming in 2021, we're going to have Mythic Megamorph. Okay.
Mythic Megamorph.
when it flips, it gets a +1/+1 counter and then adds like 3 green mana to your mana pool. Draws a card too.
Are you sure that isn't just like you can pay like when it enters the battlefield, like the new Mythic Megamorph, whatever you want to call it, is gonna just also do something when it ETBs, and then when you flip it up, it'll do something else.
Oh, that'd be good.
And then check this out. You can then turn it face down, but at a 90-degree angle again for an like morph cost again. So you just do this revolving door, just woohoo, just constantly flipping cards up and down.
I actually wonder if they'll bring in like the half tap, like instead of tapping 90 degrees, you tap 45.
They are Mythic Morph. It's gonna be a thing.
They did
mark my words.
They did the untap. I want to see either the quarter tap, the half tap, or like the 360 tap. Right?
It would just become Pokemon. You know that, right? We would
spin
have to
this
turn
card in a circle.
This is Mythic Morph. It has to be face down, upside down. Okay, cool.
All right. That's all the fish mail we have this week. Thank you to everybody who sent them in. If you have questions, send them to @MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 306 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So, Richard, Crib, Thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Shudder for supporting the show. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes down in the world of Magic. So until then, have a great week, everyone. And this is the crew signing out.